So another windy day, and construction's still going on, and we get the nail pops and the guns in the background, and no fire on a show called Campfire Conversations because of the burn ban. But hey, we're out here and we're enjoying the fall weather, and to be honest with you, I'm kind of liking the coolness. This is Mackenzie Shelton, by the way. She is a realtor. How many hats do you wear?
A lot. Yeah. Yep.
It's part of what reason I was hoping I'd get to talk to you was just about some of the different things that were going on with you. But I guess we'll start with real estate, just because I know that you've got several offices, you've got a team working under you, you've got all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So a little bit of your background then. How far back does that career go for you?
Yeah, so I've actually never done anything other than real estate. Graduated college in 2010 and no one was hiring. So
what's your degree in?
Actually social work.
Okay.
Listen,
I know a guy that graduated with a master's degree in psychology and took a job selling Weber grills. So that's just, I think, kind of how it works.
It does, yeah. Well, and so I was trying to find a job, ended up finding a job working for a apartment complex as a leasing consultant. So I eventually, kind of through the years, ended up switching over from property management to actually getting my real estate license. I like to joke that my husband is the whole reason that I ended up getting my license. I was actually going back to school for nursing, and we weren't married yet at the time. We were pretty seriously dating, and he said, I just don't think you have enough compassion to be a nurse. Maybe you should go get your real estate license.
That's got to be a hard conversation.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, he made the right call in telling me that. And I went and got my real estate license. So I've been licensed for 10 years. And I started off mostly working in property management. When I got my license, I was still doing that, but kind of slowly moved over to residential sales. And within about 5 years, I was closing like 50 plus deals a year. My issue with that was I didn't have anybody helping me. So I was stretched pretty thin. I'm a mom, so I had 3 pretty little kids at the time. And I just really needed some leverage. And so that's why I started a real estate team in 2019. And we've just kind of slowly evolved over the last 5 years to where we are now. I'm going to tell you what, the hardest thing I've ever done is run a real estate team. It is really it's very difficult to manage people who are technically self-employed, right? So every real estate agent is self-employed. And, but it's been this beautiful evolution of like really kind of struggling those first couple years, but just because I kind of persevered and had some resilience, like we have really come out on the other side of it, and we're running a very well-oiled machine now, so it's great.
Well, you started in 2019, 2020 COVID hits.
Yes.
Everything changes.
Yes.
You can't, and plus the real estate market just kind of grinds to a halt for a while.
Well, so it did very temporarily, right? But then they lowered rates so much that 2020 and 2021, if you asked about any real estate agent in our area, those were the best years that they ever had in the industry ever. Yep.
Well, the flip side to that, though, is when rates were that low, people got conditioned to rates being that low.
They did.
Now that they've kind of returned to normal, everyone thinks that they're sky high.
Oh, yes.
And people don't want to leave that mortgage.
No, they do not. I will say, I have this conversation a lot with some of the agents on my team because they're still fairly new in the business. And I'm like, if you can make it through a market like this, you will be able to make it through any market, because right now it really the only people that are moving are people that have to, right? Or the perfect property that they've been waiting for years has come on the market, right? Otherwise, they're not leaving that 2 or 3% interest rate. So.
Yeah, it's, well, I sold my house a little over 2 years ago, and I was thinking that, I just got out at the peak time. Well, the value's gone up on it since then. That's what's been going on around here. I've talked with other realtors about this. I'm curious about your perspective of it.
Yeah.
Is this a correction that's going to stay, or do you see it being cyclical and maybe we'll start to see values go back down again?
I really don't think that we're going to see values decrease like they did, post 08, the market crash and everything like that. I know that's what everyone's hoping for, but I just don't see that happening. We've seen a small correction in our area. When I say small correction, I mean like in 2020 and 2021, and even kind of going into 2022, a lot of people were gaining 20% equity in their property in a year.
Yeah.
So, which is not normal, right? Over a span of like 50 years, the average is 4% a year. Okay. So right now in our area, we're seeing, maybe between 8 and 9%, which doesn't seem like a lot for people, right? When they're used to getting 20% year over year for 3 years. So, it sometimes feels like the market has slowed down quite a bit, and it has, but we're not going to see, people lose hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity in, the span of a year or something like that. So
when I bought my house in 2015 versus when I sold it in 2022, it more than doubled.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And it really probably, those last 3 years or what?
Yeah, in the last 3 years.
Yep, created that momentum.
It really went crazy. I mean, it had gone up.
Oh yeah.
Before then, but it was,
And
it was something to see and to watch, and it's almost hypnotic looking at those numbers.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, and this all kind of got compounded. See, what nobody's really talking about is like this all kind of got compounded by the fact that when you had 08 happen, you had a bunch of builders who weren't building because they either went out of business, right? Or they got nervous, with the market conditions. So we basically had a span of almost 6 years where there was not a whole lot of new construction happening, which is why you will hear people say there's a shortage in the market, right? It's not because we have more people, right? Or something like that. It's because no one was building houses for almost 6 years.
Right.
So that's what kind of created the snowball that we have now, which is the shortage that has happened. And even for rental homes too. So apartment complexes, if you go out in West Omaha, they're building them right and left. It's because there's not enough rental properties for people to live in either. So
yeah, the same thing in Council Bluffs.
Yes.
And there's new properties going up in Council Bluffs.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
there's I don't know if they're going to be rentals or not. The condos that are going in over at River's Edge.
Yes, I don't know if those are going to be,
or if they're selling them as condominiums. And I know that on Valley View, there's the new one going up, and rent has gone up, and it's just the way of the world, and you have to adapt. You don't have a choice.
No.
There's no what else am I going to do? You're not doing anything else.
Nope.
You have to adapt. You have to figure out the new way of doing things.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
That's one of the things I love talking about with folks in your industry is you kind of get a real sense about how everything is based on what's going on with real estate.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I feel like the economy, market condition, everything kind of somehow centers around what's happening with real estate. So, yeah.
Another thing that's going on as we're recording this, because it's, I could look a lot different now. You're seeing us 10 years from now. But as we're recording this, we're in an election cycle, and there's an election coming up in less than a month.
Yep.
And does that make anybody uneasy? I mean, I'm not talking about policy or any candidate or anything like that, but just the fact that that's out there. Does that make things a little squirrely? Yeah,
so I've been kind of preaching to my team this year, all of the agents on my team, that as we get closer to election time, you are going to have a whole group of people that are going to say, I need to see what happens with this election before I make a move, right? And even kind of leading up to the election, there's a lot of uncertainty. It doesn't really matter which side of the coin you're on. There's uncertainty, right? And so we will see right now, honestly, the market's a little wonky in our area. Typically houses that usually would sell pretty quickly are kind of not moving very quickly. And so it's a little unpredictable as far as like what's actually going to happen with the houses that we're listing right now. And then usually after an election, you're going to have an entire, almost 50% of the population that's going to be pretty devastated by whatever the results are, right? And so that 50% of the population is going to kind of halt whatever they're doing for at least a few months. I don't know, they almost kind of grieve a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Before they're going to kind of wrap their heads around, okay, this is just the way of the world, and I'm going to, you know, and I always kind of try and bring people back to like, what was your ultimate goal, right? You needed more space because you had another kid, or you need to downsize because you're getting a little bit older and this is just too much for you to maintain, right? So we always try and go back to like, what was the real motivation of why they wanted to move, so that we can kind of still help them in that journey. But yeah, it does tend to kind of get a little weird right after the election. So
how did the new regulations and laws about buyer representatives, how did that work out for you? Because I'm guessing you've gotten a lot of questions on that, and I would guess maybe even a little pushback on it from some people.
You know, it's funny, no pushback. No. I honestly was prepared for that. I was kind of expecting it. But to be honest, I think it's made our job easier. And really the reason why is because prior to this, if we didn't show them the house because they weren't, you know, pre-approved, they didn't, you know, or maybe we weren't sure what their real situation was, or I don't know, they just wanted to see the house because they were, you know, kind of looky-loos or whatever. If we didn't show it to them, they're going to the next agent, right? Well,
Right.
Now we're all kind of on the same playing field as far as if you want to go look at this home, you have to sign paperwork with me, right? And every agent has to do that. So it actually creates a better sense of loyalty with the person that you're working with. And also it honestly kind of weeds out people who aren't very serious, which helps me not waste my time, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a blessing. We were always kind of trying to get those signed prior to this. But again, because not everybody was on the same playing field, that's when we were actually getting pushback, because they could say, well, my friend who also is a realtor isn't going to make me sign that, so I'll go work with them instead.
Right, and also it was somebody else's decision,
Yeah.
so you don't have to try to justify it anymore.
No.
Because that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I never really looked at it that way.
And here's the thing, I think the big conversation around that has been, well, now sellers aren't going to pay buyers' agents, and buyers have to pay their own fees, and how are they going to do all of that? You know, there are ways to work those things into contracts. There are ways to negotiate all of that. So again, if somebody, just like going back to if a first-time home buyer doesn't have maybe the closing costs that they need, they were asking the seller for that, right? So there's ways to negotiate that still help everybody be able to win, and it doesn't necessarily put any sort of buyer or seller honestly at a disadvantage, because if you're a seller and that's the only offer that you have, well, you need to consider that offer. So yeah.
My thinking also is that, I mean, obviously you're in sales, but it's a different kind of sales.
Yes.
But
yeah.
There are a certain percentage of people who like to roll the dice, and they are trying to second guess interest rates.
Yeah.
And second guess property values.
Yeah.
And things like that. And consistently what I hear from anybody in the industry is make it dependent on your need, don't make it dependent on those.
Yep.
How do you get that message across without sounding like you're trying to sell somebody on that?
Yeah, sure. So I am probably the least pushy person that you'll ever come, and I feel like salespeople always kind of get that reputation that we're pushy. Yep. So I would say I'm probably one of the least pushy people that you'll come across. If you're telling me, hey, you know, I don't know how I'm going to make this work at a 7% interest rate, right? But I really need to move for whatever the reason is, right? we have ways, again, to like work around some of those things. So my job more is a problem solver to help you get to your goal rather than to be pitchy and salesy, right? And if ultimately it just doesn't work, well, it just doesn't work this year, and maybe let's talk next year. We don't know what rates will be next year, right? I come across people that really can't make it work with, maybe what their income is or how much money they have for a down payment or whatever. I don't think that they have to put that dream off forever. I think it's just something that we kind of get a plan in place. Okay, maybe we can help you figure out how to save some more money or pay down some of your debt. Or maybe we're going to go to a seller and ask them to buy down your rate so that your mortgage payment is a little more affordable for you. There's lots of different ways to kind of problem solve that hopefully we can still help people be homeowners. So
I think what I'm hearing then is don't prejudge yourself.
Yeah.
Let somebody else that's a professional work with you and see whether or not it's possible.
Yes, exactly. And I think the most important thing for a really good real estate agent is to have a really good lender on their side, someone who also likes to problem solve like that, because believe me, there's plenty of real estate agents and lenders who are not problem solvers, and they're just kind of like, well, that's just where the chips fall. So I always try and align myself with people in the industry that kind of think the way that I do, because then if there is something that we can help that buyer or seller with, I have, resources for them to be able to try and fit that puzzle piece in there. So,
well, let's talk about some of your other hats. One of them is you've kind of gotten in a little bit to doing what I do.
Yes.
And you have your own podcast. And talk a bit about the decision behind starting something like that. Why did you want to reach people with this type of medium?
Sure. So it's kind of been a thought of mine for the last few years. And I was just kind of not in a place to be, I was like, I can't take on one more thing right now, right? And I've been able, through my real estate team, to kind of get some more leverage to help with some of the pieces that, are a really big kind of mental time suck for me, right? Mm-hmm. And so this was kind of a year where I was actually invited to be on some podcasts, like kind of towards the end of last year and beginning of this year. And I thought, maybe this is the right time. I'm getting asked to speak about the things that I know and understand. And so what better way to kind of segue into that with my own podcast so that I can, again, reach people with what I know and understand. And it's always kind of tugged on my heart that entrepreneurs, especially women who are also mothers, really struggle with life balance. Mm-hmm. And I've been there and I've been in their shoes, and especially from the real estate side of things, your schedule is very you don't know what you're doing day to day, right? Mm-hmm. So it is quite a juggling act. And I thought, if I can maybe give some people advice on things that have worked for me, then it will hopefully help some people. So that's really like kind of my driving motivator behind it. The other piece of it is I really do want to continue to grow my real estate team and our business. And so what better way to try to maybe meet somebody who I might not, just meet through my industry, but might be listening to the podcast. So,
well, I'm gonna put my own sales hat on here for a second.
All right.
I'm gonna give you some other things that you might have already thought of,
yes.
And maybe you're approaching with this, or maybe not. Very early on into doing this kind of work, I learned that there is a side value besides just who it is that's listening or viewing the podcast, and that is, who are you bringing on as a guest?
Sure.
And who are you partnering yourself with that can benefit from what it is that you do, and it turns into a tremendous networking opportunity for a business owner or an entrepreneur. Because now you have just given something of value to a person that's sitting across from you.
Right.
And that tends to, a lot of times, can be the beginning of a relationship, because you know better than anybody how important relationships are in any kind of business. And it's a cliche, but it can't be fake.
No.
Because people can sniff that out in a second.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Right.
So that turns into, now I have just been able to sit down and for 30 to 45 minutes, or however long your podcast is, you can have a targeted conversation with somebody. And how valuable are those conversations?
Yes, absolutely.
As a networking chance, I have seen people that I've worked with get business from those people.
Sure, absolutely.
And it's worked for me too.
Yeah.
That can become a huge value. To me, it's almost more important than the listeners. Now, don't get me wrong. I think listeners are vastly important.
Absolutely.
You know, the new morning show that I started, I'm looking at those numbers every day.
Yeah.
You're trying to say, okay, how many views do I have? Okay, that's great. And okay, that one didn't do as well. Why not? Well, it's probably just because the algorithm didn't kick in. That's probably all that it was.
Right.
But still, to track those trends. So yeah, they are important.
Yeah.
But don't discount who you're talking to. And plus, I learned so much from sitting in this chair, talking to people in that chair.
Right.
And there's a value to me from having this podcast past even the client end of it or the listener. It's what I'm learning.
Yes.
And how I can incorporate that into what it is that I'm doing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I know I need to slow. I have so many great ideas for this, right? I need to slow down a little bit, but kind of long term, the goal is to bring moms from all different, kind of businesses. I have a friend who owns her own veterinary clinic out in Harlan, right? Mm-hmm. I've already been you're going to be on my podcast, right?
Exactly.
It's stuff like that she's going to have such a different perspective than I even would. And, maybe I want to have Kim on at some point,
Good luck with that.
I know. I know. Yeah.
She has this thing with video, which I respect.
I know. Yeah. But, just all of those things, just so, again, you can learn things and get different perspectives from people. Absolutely. I agree.
It's strange how some of the conversations go when I sit down and talk to people.
Yeah.
Because as I said, and I say it nearly every time, I don't prep for these.
Yeah.
I just kind of let it go how it's going to go. And several weeks ago, I had a local musician on, Dan Olson, with his band, A Sack of Lions, and he's recorded in Nashville. He's up for a British CMA right now.
Yeah.
We ended up talking for about 45 minutes on philosophy and stoicism, and just because we landed on a common passion.
Sure.
And it just kind of went that direction.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that part of doing these things, as opposed to, okay, I have a list of questions here and I want to make sure that I get all of these answered.
Yes.
No, that's not how I like to do things anyway, and that's my style.
Sure.
But that doesn't necessarily have to be somebody else's style.
Right. Absolutely.
But I think it's great that you're doing that and getting out there. If I remember right, you're just doing audio right now, correct?
So I have been recording them. I did put a handful of them on YouTube so far, but honestly, it's pretty rudimentary. Hopefully I'll get better over time. Right. I'm just being honest. I'm just kind of learning. So
Well, there's a lot of different tips, and there's a lot of different companies out there working with podcasters that are making it easier.
Yes. I know. I think I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to need some more help. So,
But it does, technology helps.
Yeah.
And there's just some different tricks and things that you just kind of naturally gravitate towards, because once you're in the industry and you're doing it, then that's when everybody knows your phone's listening.
Right.
If you and I are sitting here having a conversation about motorcycles, next thing you know, Les Hill Harley Davidson ads are showing up.
Yeah.
Even though, and the strange thing is, sometimes I just think about it and they show up. So.
I know. I have had that happen so many times. It's crazy. Yep.
That's not all you're doing. Tell us about your latest.
Yeah. So So on top of being a real estate agent, my husband and I also own some rental properties. We have flipped a house to 2 houses a year for quite a while. And we now are, I think we've lost our minds. We bought we bought a 40-acre piece of property that's just right down the road.
Right.
And I think we're going to try and make a go at some small farming. We've kind of already started down that path. So we bought some cows. We actually just took the first one to the locker the other day.
Wow.
And that's kind of the direction that we're going. So what has kind of ended up happening from being a part of the real estate industry and selling homes to people is I ended up, not only because I used to live on a smaller acreage out just on the east side of Underwood.
Okay.
So I ended up kind of becoming this acreage specialist. Everyone who knows me calls me the acreage queen. And with that kind of being said, I ended up having a lot of clients who, wanted to buy an acreage property for one reason or another. And it seems to be evolving basically since 2020 when COVID happened, that pretty much everybody who wants to buy a piece of land wants to do some sort of homesteading or farming on it, small farming, right? And I kind of realized that I actually did know a lot, and I was giving advice on things. Some of it was personal knowledge, right? But some of it was just, I've sold enough properties to kind of know what other people are doing. And, I like to get to know people and ask them questions. So then it kind of evolved to like, well, why are we not trying to do this ourselves? If I've got the knowledge and I'm doing some of these things on our small acreage, like why are we not trying to maybe scale up on some of this? So we're apparently going to try our hand at being farmers. And I actually took a class at Iowa Western this last fall. I got a college credit for it. And it was a class all about small farming. And they actually have people from the business college come and talk about the business side of things. And then they have people come and teach on the more, agricultural side of things. And I learned so much in that class. That class was so valuable. If anybody is looking to do small scale farming, I highly recommend taking that class. They're actually running it again right now. They're running it just in the fall. So it's just kind of evolved from there, and we're not jumping into things, full force. We're kind of taking it, day by day, but that's kind of the direction I think we're heading. So.
I know I spent a day one time just running numbers in my head about, okay, how much ground would I need growing organic tomatoes? What's the spacing on them? What's the average yield? And I had the whole thing worked up in my head. I didn't do it. But, I had it all worked out in my head. The small scale farming though can be very profitable.
Oh yes.
Without large scale, because we live in Iowa, so we see giant expanses of seed corn and soybeans.
Yep.
But this soil is also very, very good.
Oh yeah.
Go to the farmer's market and look at some of the stuff that's being sold there.
Seriously.
And you're like, oh man, these guys are really good at this.
Oh
and we live in that kind of area.
Yep.
Yeah,
we have some of the richest soil in the world. And it's like, absolutely. People should be capitalizing on that.
I watched a documentary several years ago about a small farm over in Illinois. Now, they were within an hour's driving distance of Chicago, so they did a lot of selling to farm-to-table restaurants.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But they were supporting, I think it was 3 families on 100 acres and doing pretty well for themselves.
So I wonder if this is the same person that I just finished reading a book. It's called The Growing Season by Sarah Fry. It's Frey.
Okay.
She basically, this whole book is an autobiography that she wrote, but the premise of the book is she grew up on an 80-acre piece of property that when she was like, I think 17, her father was going into foreclosure, and she went to the bank and convinced them to let her take out a loan to keep this place afloat. And then she basically took her and her 5 brothers, started a melon, specifically melon and pumpkin business.
Right.
And she just like was so brazen, went into the Walmart distribution centers and told them that she could get them a better price for all of their produce and all this stuff. And now she owns like thousands of acres all across the country just by selling melons and pumpkins. Yes.
There's a huge market for that. I mean, we have it right here in Iowa.
Yes.
You know, it's people have heard of muscatine melons.
Oh,
And I think a lot of people don't realize, that's coming from Muscatine, Iowa.
Yes, yes.
You know?
I've literally been there during their melon season.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
And it's, our growing season is shorter than it is in California. So, and that's why a lot of vegetables come from there.
Right.
But if you're purposeful about what it is that you're doing, you can do very well. And I've seen, like I said, I've seen some of the vendors at the farmers markets, and they have phenomenal stuff.
Yes.
Just phenomenal.
Really.
So I'm looking forward to seeing your booth.
Yes, yes,
You're going to have to start hiring people to work here.
I think I will, And you know, it's so funny, this year we did such a much bigger garden than we've ever done before. And we had all those hailstorms come through.
Yeah.
And I know the people that have a place right down off of L34, they have a farm stand and they go to a bunch of the farmers markets. Their last name is Jung.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So they kind of had similar, you know, but my problem was I didn't, they were smarter than me. They overplanted everything, you know, and I kind of was like, I don't know if I want to go that big yet. You know, I've still got a couple other jobs that I'm doing, you know, sort of thing. So we didn't get to sell as much as I think we could have, should have. But I really do think that this next year, hopefully, will be a lot better. And we're going to get a nice big greenhouse on the property and all that good stuff. So,
Young, he understands about displaying.
Yes,
and when he gets ready and he's got his truck backed up and he's got his shelves up and he starts putting the vegetables there, it looks like a postcard.
I know.
I mean, it is, and the lines that he has are tremendous. I had a cabbage about this big. It was crazy. It looked like a beach ball.
I know.
But he's very, very good. And I went over and talked to him a little bit about it, and he was just kind of reserved.
Yes.
It wasn't, you know.
Yes.
But still,
he's very quiet.
But it was tons of fun to get to learn a little bit about him, and I think there's more and more people that are starting to do that, and you're starting to. If you can carve a piece of ground off, because you talk about prices of homes. The price of farm ground is. I mean, it's going. There's places it's going. I've seen for over $20,000 an acre. I'm like,
if you're anywhere, you know, 10 minutes away from Counts Bluffs right now, if it's prime farmland, you can get probably $30,000 to $35,000 an acre. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Depending on what the use is for, but it's crazy.
Yeah, that is just. But also, I mean, because you said you're just down the road. It's a beautiful part of the country.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, Western Iowa, and this is something else that Dan Olson and I talked about, is we are. It could be a tourist area. It's just so beautiful around here.
Yep.
We're not encouraging that, please. No.
Yes, but stay away. Yeah. No.
But and plus you've got access to Omaha.
Yeah.
You've got access to small towns.
Yes.
It's everything is just right here, and plus. I've talked about it before, so I apologize for repeating myself, but Southwest Iowa as a region, I think they identify more with themselves than any other part of the state or any other place that I've ever been. When you say you're from Southwest Iowa, you know, whether you're from Minden or Hastings or Malvern or even going down to Bedford and Clarinda and places like that, there is a camaraderie and it's something in common that people feel with each other being from this region. Yeah,
so funny story. I did not grow up here. I actually grew up mostly in Texas, but I graduated high school in Omaha. That's where my husband and I met. But he is from the Avoca Shelby area.
Okay.
And so when we moved to Underwood, you know, I was kind of an outsider, right? You know, new person in the community. And the only way that I could get people to kind of relax around me and not have them think that I was like your typical Omahaan, right? Was to say, oh, my husband grew up in the Avoca Shelby area. And people would immediately just be like, oh, okay, she's one of us.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and I agree with you. I have never experienced that in any other place that I've lived, where it doesn't really matter what town you're from, as long as you're kind of from this region. People are just like, oh, okay. Like,
You talk about Omaha. I remember it's not a mystery. Everybody pretty much knows that I was running the radio station in Council Bluffs last year. And one of the first appearances we did, we went out to the farmers market, had a booth set up, and a lady came over and was saying, oh, I've listened to you. I think you're great, and we love the show and all of this. And she said, do you live here in town? And I said, yeah, I actually don't live very far from here. We were at Bayless Park.
Yeah.
And the lady that was with me at the time was the sales manager, and she had, and do you live here too? And she said, no, I have a place over in Omaha. And the lady just went, oh. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation.
Yep. It's so funny to me, especially because I sell real estate in Nebraska and Iowa, and our team has agents in Lincoln, Omaha, and Southwest Iowa. The rivalry, just unspoken, right, between Omaha and the Council Bluffs general area, and then even Lincoln and Omaha, like, it is just hilarious to me. Like, you are either for one of those areas or you are not.
Well, and you may have noticed too that you get down into Bellevue.
Yeah.
And Bellevue is, we're not Omaha.
Yes.
They are very much about the Bellevue community.
Yep.
And I always find it, I mean, there's basically a 4-lane highway that takes you right up into Omaha, and it never feels like you've left.
No.
But still, they have their own identity there, and they want to make sure they hang on to that.
Oh yeah, I have a couple of friends who either grew up in Bellevue or still live in Bellevue, and yeah, believe me, they do not want to identify like they're from Omaha.
For me, I'm more of, we're all in this together, and live in the same region. And I tease folks over there that, as long as you're not a Nebraska fan, but that's a joke. I don't really mean that.
Yeah.
But there is that, it does exist there, and I'm not sure what it's going to take to completely get past it, and maybe we don't. I don't know. But
I don't know. I think it's fairly healthy. I get kind of teased a lot over in my Omaha office. They're like, "Oh, you live over in Iowa," and I'm like, "You guys, you don't understand. When my husband and I met, he was like, I'm moving back to Iowa someday," and I was kind of like, I don't know about, because I had never lived over here. I never heard anything really that great being from, living in Omaha, and I mean, literally, you could not pay me to live somewhere else now. And I just love being a part of the Underwood community, the Council Bluffs community. I have gotten to meet so many wonderful, I've sold houses all the way down to Shenandoah, all the way over to Atlantic, all the way up to Ottawa, and all of them. Everybody that I have had the opportunity to meet is just so wonderful. And everyone has such a sense of pride of their area and their community. And that's what's important, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that if someone has a very negative opinion about this side of the river, they haven't been here.
No.
They haven't come over and seen it. Because if you, and again, come have coffee, I'll take you around.
Yes.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
It's not what people seem to, and it's, I don't know that they're really thinking about anything specific. I think it's just a general feeling.
I think it is.
That, and then maybe they didn't come far enough into town or whatever it is. That it's, I'm with you. I don't know that I could ever live in Omaha.
No.
It's there's something about being over here. There's a sense of community that goes past just the community that you live in.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. And I think honestly that's why we've been here now for we're going on like 7.5 years that I've lived here. This is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. And that says a lot because if I was not really content here and didn't feel that sense of community that has always been so important to me in any of the big cities that I've lived in, right? Like you need to feel like you belong to something. And I 100% feel that here. And I've made some wonderful friendships that I know will last, the rest of my life, right?
Well, before we wrap this up, I'm going to let somebody else sing some praises about where we are at right now, because I talk about the acres. You can kind of see the signs back there from the camera. But since we moved, since it was so windy, I said, let's just get out of the wind, and said we're not going to have a fire anyway.
Yeah.
But what the Sneckloff family has done with this place here, and you can see how they continue to make improvements, and I know you're friends with them as I am. So I want to hear it from somebody else besides just me, because I know you're friends, and it's a great relationship that you have with them.
You want to know why? It's so wonderful. What I've gotten to see in the last 7.5 years in this general area is people that have either grown up here or moved here, one way or the other. They do have such a sense of pride in this area and being a part of either the Council Bluffs or Underwood community or the surrounding areas. And we now have this whole generation of people who really want to see everything improve. And literally, Kim is like a prime example of taking something that was great to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. And just making it a million times better. I feel like everything she touches, she just makes better, and this place is a prime example of that. And just even last year, I had the opportunity to come to a fundraiser for one of our very dear friends who was diagnosed with cancer, and they were raising some money for him and his family. And I mean, the generosity that the Sneckloffs have, like that's the kind of stuff that you get back tenfold just by being a kind person to the people in your community. So I think they're wonderful people.
And it's a wonderful facility. And what I tell people is, if you have an event coming up, just make sure it's on your list of places to check out.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to sell it and say you need to come here. I think you do, but I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm just saying, get it on your tour.
Yes.
Come take a look.
Definitely.
See whether or not it's a fit for you, because they're so good at everything that's going on around here.
I know.
And they keep everything they add is just, that's perfect.
Yes.
What you just did is perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this was I'm saying this as the stamped, patio was not here when I was here like a year ago, approximately. And just simple things like this have just completely elevated the space, make it beautiful for photos, right? All of those things. So, yeah.
Well, I thank you very much for taking some time out. You're crazy busy, and
thank you.
Willing to come over and do this.
Thank you very much. It was an honor. Yeah.
Well, and we will be back with another episode of Campfire Conversations very, very soon, and maybe we'll even have a fire next time. Until then, take care.